This is Janice.
And I'm Sarah N.
And we're your hosts for Explore This, a podcast for the modern day working professional.
Each week, we explore actionable insights on how you can thrive personally and professionally.
With us here today, we have Dr. Ong Kian Ming with us, better known as OK Man.
Call me Kian Ming, yes.
Got it. So Kian Ming is the former Deputy Minister of MITI and a two-term Member of Parliament in Malaysia from 2013 to 2022, representing the Democratic Action Party and serving the largest parliamentary constituency here in Malaysia. Not only does he have a long list of accolades and achievements, he has also studied a degree, a master's, and a PhD, and is also currently the Program Director of Malaysia's very first Philosophy, Politics, and Economics program at Taylor's University. So, wow, Kemi, I gotta say, the academics really run strong in your blood.
I'm a nerd, so I like to study. Anyway, thanks for having me on this program, Janice and Sarah. And sorry, I was a bit late today, but your audience won't know this, so
It's okay. We're all good. So welcome
All
to the
good.
Explore This podcast, Kian Ming, and we're very happy to have you here. We'd love to start with a conversation to hear and know a little bit about the lesser known facts of little Ong Kian Ming. So what was little OK Man like in his childhood days? We want to start with that because I think that's something lesser known by our audience.
Sure.
We've heard you talk a lot about different stories in different podcasts, but I don't think we know so much about your childhood days.
yeah, sure. And I'll share a little bit and relate it back to my career. So one of the things that probably a lot of people don't know about is I was a very naughty kid. In fact, I would regularly have to see the discipline teacher, and every time my mother came to school, she would be very anxious because the teachers would complain about me misbehaving lah. So even then, I think I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Couldn't sit still. Wanted to sort of like shake things up, and I think that was sort of like my early entry into politics, especially politics in the opposition bench.
Wow. What were the kind of things that you got into trouble for?
Make a lot of noise in class, not pay attention, get into fights, get people in trouble, get my friends in trouble.
Wow.
One little thing, I allowed one of my friends to copy me in exam in class. And then the teacher caught both of us and then gave us both zeros. So that was my only zero in my secondary school experience. But I think that will leave an imprint on me for a long time.
Very generous of you, though, to share your hard-earned wisdom with your fellow classmates.
Yeah, and I think that would be something that we'll be sharing more about in terms of how I try to share knowledge in the political sphere during my career as an MP as well.
Tapping on that childhood note, did you, as a child, aspire to be a politician or go into the arena of politics?
No, definitely not. I wanted to be a doctor, like most
Typical Asian kids.
Compliant Asian kids.
Yes, and then I told my parents, my studies are quite good, the results are pretty good. Do you want me to be a doctor? Then they said, no. Doctor life is very difficult.
Wow.
I said, just try something else. And then my dad was an architect, and my wife is an architect. Of course, at that time, I didn't know her yet, and I asked, why don't I become an architect? Then my dad said, oh, this life is very, very difficult. And then that was confirmed later on when my wife became an architect. I married her when I knew she was an architect. It was a tough profession. And then I wanted to go into business or do something in the banking or consulting sphere so I could get rich very quickly and retire when I was 35. That didn't materialize. Then later on, architect to management consultant, which I eventually ended up being. And then later on, academia, politics, and then now to a new career phase of my life.
We wanted to find out a bit more about your consulting life because we do have a lot of listeners who are in the world of professional services. How did that experience shape you, your 2 years in the Boston Consulting Group? And why did you eventually decide to leave?
Yeah, so BCG was a fantastic experience because you learn a lot in a very short period of time. You're thrown into the deep end to learn about industries that previously you had no knowledge of. So my first case was a case on alcohol and spirits, which I didn't even know the brands. I didn't know the difference between bourbon and scotch, So it was a great learning experience. I went to different outlets that sold these products, got exposed to that sector, and also learned a bit about the business of that sector as well. And then there were projects on banking and oil and gas and telco. So fantastic experience, great colleagues. Why did I leave consulting? Very interesting that you asked. In the past, when people were to ask me this question, I would say, I didn't want to do consulting for the rest of my life. Maybe it wasn't such a good fit in terms of my future priorities. That is all true. But I will also make an admission here. I couldn't hack it in the consulting world. It was a 2-year up or out strategy. And that's the timeline that most of us face. And for various reasons, I just couldn't fit into life as a consultant in BCG. Of course, I will also say now that I think if I were to go back to BCG at a more senior level, I would be able to contribute and be a much more effective consultant at a higher level because of all the experiences that I've learned and all the mistakes that I've made in the past.
At the end of the day, doors open up in different ways as well, and it has led you to where you are today. And so for yourself, Kian Ming, you also worked as a policy analyst in 2 separate think tanks, in INSUP as well as SEDAR, and then later joined DAP as an election strategist in 2012. So what actually was that driving force or that key motivation which then inspired you to take a seemingly huge step into politics when you knew that that wasn't your original path?
Yeah, so I have always had an interest in wanting to change things from a policy perspective. I think that my thoughts in this area has crystallized over the years. In the beginning, I think my biggest influence was when I was studying in Singapore as an ASEAN scholar. And, in Singapore, as you and many of your audience members would know, things just work there, right? And I was comparing it with the situation in Malaysia and saw that there were many gaps. One part of me thought to myself and said, why don't I just look for a career in Singapore? It's less complicated. Career pathway is probably more well-defined. And then, then part of me said, maybe you should come back to Malaysia to see whether you can do something different and make a change. I think that was the start of my sort of like engagement in the policy space, starting with the think tanks. And people who are familiar with me know that these 2 think tanks were linked to other political parties, namely MC and Gerakan. I didn't join as members. I met a few people in that ecosystem from both parties, and I realized that it wasn't a good fit for me. And when I joined DAP, I realized that that was the right fit because you had a lot more people and a lot more leaders who were more policy focused, not all of them, but enough, many of them. And also a party that allowed younger people, I was a bit younger then, to contribute to the party in meaningful and new ways. Yeah.
I think you ended up being there for maybe longer than you anticipated that you would be. You ended up even as the Deputy Minister at MITI. What would you say was your biggest win or biggest achievement, you would say personally, that's rewarding for you in terms of policy shifts that you're most proud of?
Just to give some context, when I was a member of parliament as opposition from 2013 to 2018, I think the approach I took was quite different from many of my colleagues in opposition, in the sense that, again, I focused a lot on policies. I wrote a lot of statements on the economy, on education, on elections, I did some things in the environment sphere. And my approach has always been trying to be proactive and to give positive suggestions, constructive criticism to the government when I was in opposition. And that allowed me to see things more from a policy making and implementation standpoint. Before the 2018 elections, I was part of the Manifesto Committee for Pakatan Harapan, representing my party. And I put in a couple of suggestions there which manifested themselves into actual policy. So one which, many Malaysians have benefited from is the unlimited travel pass in the Klang Valley that was introduced by Anthony Loke the first time round that he was the Minister of Transport. That time, we didn't have a system whereby you could use one pass that you could use unlimited times on the MRT, LRT, as well as the rapid bus in KL. So when that policy was introduced, 100 ringgit, it's a very popular policy. Now it's 50 ringgit. And I attribute that, again, back to my experience in Singapore, because when I was a student there, I had a bus pass that allowed me to travel unlimited times in Singapore in the bus ecosystem. So I expanded that in the Malaysian context to include rail. And it's, something that's used by many people in the Klang Valley. And in terms of putting a lot of effort into was the Industry 4.0 master plan or Industry Forward master plan, whereby on the implementation part, I traveled with the MITI team to every state in Malaysia to promote Industry 4.0 policies. And at the time, it didn't get a lot of traction because a lot of the SMEs were wondering, what is this plan? How do I make use of it? And then finally, I saw fruition. Not when I was in government, but when I was out of government and during COVID. Because that was the time when a lot of these SMEs thought, oh, look, we have a lot of time on our hands. We need to automate because a lot of our foreign workers have left Malaysia and gone back home. And that was when the interest in automation and industry forward or industry 4.0 policies became much more apparent. So I think those would be two of my more memorable achievements.
And these achievements, I would say, are so beneficial to the men and women on the street, to SMEs, to different companies out there who require these resources. And I'm sure it is, so rewarding to see it come to life and come to fruition.
Yeah, and I think the key here is, as a policymaker and as a politician, sometimes you have to do all these things right with the understanding or anticipation that you may not be in a position to take credit for it. Right. So of course, if you ask me if I'm given the opportunity to say this, then I would use these as examples. But when the policy of the Unlimited Travel Pass was introduced, it was Dr. Mahathir who was on the stage as Prime Minister. It was the Minister of Transport who was there and his deputy. I was nowhere to be found. Right. But I'm the one who came out with the policy. You can ask all the leaders in DAP who are involved in that process. No one will argue that fact. But I'm very well prepared. In terms of any policies that I try to contribute into the ecosystem, even now, the important thing is that it gets taken on and executed by the right people. And then the people or the larger public benefits from it. I'm fine not taking credit for it if the credit doesn't come to me.
Wow, is this something that you had to prepare yourself for, knowing that as you step into this world, you might not, as you mentioned, you might not be the one taking the credit and the glory, but have you always known that and was prepared for it? Or it's something that you had to learn the hard way?
Again, I relate it to my Singapore experience. Because in Singapore, the policies are executed. Most of the time, you don't really attribute it to a single politician. You attribute it to, let's say, a ministry, for example, and the larger government gets credit for it. And that's always been my approach. Yes, if I can get some credit as a politician, you don't mind that, right? But I think because of that kind of training that I've had, and along the way, the academic training that I had, even some of the consulting training that I have, if let's say the client would benefit from it, then whatever proposals that you put into place, right, the customer at the end of the day, whether it's business or the masses, they won't know that a consultant was behind this. They won't know that such a person behind this consulting agency was part of the team that put in place some of these new changes, right? So that's part and parcel of my training.
Kian Ming, I'm actually curious. You shared these two examples of policies that you're very proud of. And of course, we know behind the two that are, shining examples, there might be some policies that didn't make it out of the PowerPoint deck, for example. From your experience so far, what has been some of the main roadblocks that you would describe as a policymaker when it comes to bringing a policy from strategy into ideation?
Yeah, very good question. A couple of areas that I would focus on, that I did focus on, that I'm still focusing on from a policy perspective. So firstly, the design, right? The design of a policy, it's like a business proposal, right? It's got to be sound. It's got to be stress test. You have to go through different iterations, consult different stakeholders before you get to a stage where you can actually present it to the relevant policymakers. So in the context of government, it would be, how do you want to get it from ideation to producing a cabinet paper that you can put to cabinet? And then even after that, you have to sell whatever proposal or policy that you want to execute to your colleagues in cabinet if it involves more than one ministry. Like, for example, the new Industrial Master Plan 2030, I was part of the task force that redrafted it, changed it from a sectoral to a mission-based approach. And I could see how after it was passed in cabinet, both the Minister Tengku Zafrul as well as the Deputy Liu Chin Tong, they went to different ministries that were relevant in the larger NIP ecosystem, whether it's the Ministry for Energy and the Environment, at that point in time was still one ministry, Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, to sell these policy proposals. So trying to sell it to the relevant stakeholders is important. And then, of course, finally, it is your end customer, whether it is the industry in the case of NIP, or if let's say you want to do something like subsidy targeting, you have to explain it to the masses, right? And that's part and parcel of selling the policy to a larger public. So it's a very challenging process. A lot of balls to juggle.
Well, we can see that you're a master of that, I'm very sure, juggling more than one, even two or three.
Yeah, but sometimes some of those balls will drop. It's okay.
true.
It's okay. You
That's
pick it up
life,
again.
that's human,
You pick it up again, then you go on.
Exactly, and it's also identifying which of these balls are rubber balls that can bounce back and which are glass balls that might break. So it's also about prioritization.
Yeah, well, if they break, then sometimes you really have to piece them together again. Yeah, you have no choice, you know. But of course, if let's say you can buy a new glass ball, then go ahead, then you become more careful the next time.
That's true. That's true. Well, that brings us very nicely, Kian Ming, into our conversation today about life and leadership lessons that you've had to learn the hard way. And, I'm sure that you've got so many, but for today, we just want to distill the conversation into 3 difficult lessons that you'd like to share with us and our audience. So why don't you kick us off with the first difficult lesson that you have to learn?
Sure. I'll start off each of these lessons with a story, and then maybe I can even ask you guys to respond and share your experiences, and then I will share the lesson that I learned from it. The first part is in the area of networking, going out to engage different stakeholders, engage different people. And as a politician, you definitely have to meet a lot of people across the spectrum, different race, different religions, different language backgrounds, education backgrounds. And one of the things that I had to adjust to in my life as a politician was every time I met somebody, I would have to think of the question, what does this person want from me? Right? So, it's either funding, it's either, wanting to be connected to somebody else. And especially, when I was a deputy minister, when we were in government, that, alerted my senses even more. What do they want to get out from me? It wasn't one particular difficult lesson or experience, but the accumulation of all these interactions whereby I think normally a politician would look at this and say, I'm not going to be so open, I'm going to be quite reserved. I'm not going to share a lot of information with you. I'm going to not even want to engage with you on a deeper level because I don't know where you're coming from, right? So that's the experience of most politicians. That's the approach that most politicians take. I'm just turn the tables a bit. So one of the podcasts that I listened to was Azran Osman Rani. He's known as a triathlon Ironman. I've had the pleasure of running with him before his accident. So just wondering, what was your pitch to him in terms of the kind of value that you could add, by him coming to your podcast? Do you remember?
I think, briefly, what made it quite unique about our sort of angling towards him was that we know that he's someone who is quite unconventional. He is okay with sharing his failures and sort of the less unglamorous side of things in public. So we just told him very honestly, like, look, we'd love for you to come and share about key or big failures that have really impacted you and what you learned from it. So I think maybe because the angling was a bit more unconventional, it wasn't just based on your long list of corporate achievements that convinced him to go okay, I'll give these 2 a shot.
Yeah, and I would say he did kind of take a risk on us, if I could put it that way, because like Janice mentioned, we had him in season 1, and back then, we didn't have the pleasure of meeting him in person, etc. But I will also add that having someone else connect us was very helpful, and the person who connected us could speak to our credibility, could speak to our reputation, could know that the Explore This podcast, what is it about, etc. So that definitely helped.
Yeah, so actually there's a sort of important segue back into the first lesson, which is value-added networking. So I said earlier that, a politician would usually be more reserved the higher up he goes or she goes. But for me, although I'm not in frontline politics now, I've learned along the way that the network that I've developed and built along the way can be put to very good use. And, the kind of value-added networking in terms of being able to vouch for somebody so that I can recognize this person, that kind of value-added networking is something that I do on a regular basis. So when I meet people, I always think like what you guys do as well. How can I assist this person? How can I add value to this person's ideas, to his or her career, and then to introduce others into the ecosystem that may be beneficial to this person. And the best case would be it can be a win-win situation where both of them can actually benefit from knowing each other.
Playing the devil's advocate, Kian Ming, would people then think of you as someone who name drops a lot? What do you have to say to that?
I do reference people a lot, and I think some people may not be used to initially. It's like, why are you telling me you know so many people? But I think over time, most of the people that I interact with realize that I'm just not name dropping for the sake of name dropping. I am also wanting to let people know that these are the people that I know that I can connect others to. And if let's say you feel you have a value proposition to give to another person, then I'll be happy to connect you guys. And I do it in a very public way. Not just in terms of in conversations, I do the referencing or name dropping. I like referencing better, sounds a little bit less judgmental. I do it on LinkedIn. Right. So yeah, of course I get permission from whoever and I say, look, I'll post this on social media. And then in LinkedIn, I describe my interactions with this person. Some of them are just very normal people, others are, more high powered. And through those interactions, I make it public. If people want to use me as a connection to some of these people that I've interacted with, I'm very happy to do so with the caveat that there must be a value added proposition. Right? If let's say I know that you have a value added proposition that you can propose to another person or that person can give you a value added proposition, then I will make the connection and I may be part of it. I can, introduce them. I can be at a meeting where I can facilitate even more value added discussions.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's very, very generous of you. What's the second lesson, difficult lesson that you've had to learn, whether from a personal or a professional perspective, that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, so this one, the quote-unquote hard lesson was from my own personal experience as a member of parliament. And this is in the area of sharing information and being transparent. Like all political parties, even in business, we all have WhatsApp groups, right? Sharing different kinds of things. And there's different kind of dynamics that are happening in each WhatsApp group. Usually in a group of politicians, everyone is very reserved. They don't want to say a lot because they don't want to show their hand. They don't want to accidentally offend people. To me, it was something that was a little bit strange. Given my management consulting and business background, we have this thing called knowledge management or KM, where we are incentivized to share learnings from past cases, even share PowerPoint decks and things like that, but all sanitized. Right? So in the context of politics, right, I always thought that, hey, look, if you have a statement that you've issued, share it. If there's a particular question that you have, that you want to ask that may be able to tap into the experience of different politicians, many of them who have many years of experience in politics, share it in the group, right? So that was what I tried to do. I tried to share different things that I'm doing, some of the struggles that I've had, even encouraging some of my colleagues to maybe work with me on some of these initiatives. And I think that came across as being maybe a little bit on the arrogant side, a little bit on the showy side, I definitely felt it, when I spoke to some of my colleagues in private and they would say, hey, maybe you shouldn't share so much and things like that, or they would say that, hey, this one maybe offend some people, So that was something that I had to get used to. Yeah.
So even in the face of, criticism or sometimes some backlash, what kept you going to uphold your principles on being transparent and being generous with your knowledge? Because as you've pointed out, it came around to bite you.
I think at the end of the day, a lot of the things that I tried to do, ultimately there were public benefits. People that I interacted with, that I, implemented these initiatives with, they benefited. I would post it on social media as a good politician should, and let other people see the possibility of what could be done. So I'll give you an example. During the COVID pandemic, we had the vaccination exercise. And what I realized when I went to the ground was there were pockets of undocumented migrants that did not want to go to the vaccination center because they were afraid of getting caught. They were afraid that there would be authorities that would ask for their documents. And many of them ended up not getting vaccinated. And especially, this group that I found, the wives of Rohingya refugees who stayed at home most of the time taking care of their children and whatnot. So what I did was I worked together with the Malaysian Red Crescent, got together a group of volunteers, including some NGOs, and we canvassed the low-cost flats in one of the areas in my constituency in Blakong. And we found, name list of 300 people that we had to compile, note their details down, and then submit this list to the Ministry of Health to get the vaccines for the Red Crescent and their volunteers, their doctors and others in their volunteer ecosystem to do a vaccination program for this community in my area. And I shared this experience with my colleagues, members of parliament, wanting to work with some of them to see whether some of them wanted to do similar initiatives in their own constituencies. I think that didn't make people happy because they thought maybe I was showing off. And sad to say, not many took up my offer to do similar programs. And I think the reason is quite simple. Later, I would realize undocumented refugees are not voters, right? But I still do it because I think this benefits the refugees that were undocumented migrants that ultimately got the vaccines, and it was a good example, I think, to show to the community that this vaccination process can be undertaken in a non-political way by somebody in politics in a value-added way, in a very transparent way to help others. So the first vaccination exercise went very well. In fact, the patron of the Malaysian Red Crescent, the Crown Princess of Kedah, came to visit. Right, of course, there were a lot of people there, a lot of people from Red Cross, the higher ups there, who wanted to showcase this. We were there for the entire program, and we came back 2 weeks later when there was less publicity, no higher uppers there, and we were there for the whole day to do the second vaccination. So when I saw that this was successful, I did it in another place in Semenyih, repeated the same exercise because we knew, there were like 26 blocks of low-cost flats. Definitely there would be a lot of refugees there. And then we had to undergo the same process, get my team involved, get others who are in the NGO sector involved to do the canvassing. I mean, you have to walk up, walk down, get the names and all that. And, I would do that together with my team. And then we did the second vaccination exercise. And the outcome of that exercise was I got COVID for the first time.
And you did develop resistance after that.
Yeah. And I found out when I went to Parliament actually. Yeah, so that I did a test and I said, okay, take a break 10 days, and that was my first experience with COVID. Yeah. Yep. So I think going back to the lesson of I think value-added transparency. How much do you want to share in terms of knowledge with others? Even if, let's say, you're going to face resistance, even if, let's say, you're not going to be acknowledged, even if, let's say, the knowledge that you share, people will take it and then not give credit to you. It doesn't matter. Go back to my initial experience, right? You push forth public policies that are good with the intention of doing good without having the idea that you would be able to claim credit for it. Yeah.
As a politician, sometimes you have to juggle conviction and, if I can put it bluntly, ROI. How do you balance the two?
Have to test the waters out for some of these things. If I feel convicted on something, I will discuss it with my, core team, my constituency team, whom I trust and who knows the ground better. And if they think, okay lah, Dr. Ong, this one can do, then I will get more people involved. I will put some, funding behind it and use my sort of like a network, to do something that can be successfully implemented. But if, let's say, I throw it out to them, they say, hey, this one tak boleh pakai lah, then okay lah, listen to them and then we pull back lah, because, we only have limited time and resources lah. Yeah. And sometimes you have to try something out a little bit. If it doesn't work, then okay lah, just count it off and write it off lah. It's okay. Failure is part of life and you shouldn't be afraid of it lah. Yeah.
Moving on to our third lesson
Okay.
that you love to share. What is the difficult third lesson
Sure.
for our audience today?
Yeah, this one is a negative experience that was felt not by me, but by a mentee of mine rather. And I've known her for over 20 years. And she came to me recently and said, oh no, I'm in trouble. Because I got a call from the authorities. They said that a package was delivered under my name to a particular address, and there was a contraband found. There were drugs found, and then we need you to come to the police station to give a testimony. And she was psychoed. They said you couldn't tell this to anyone because you'll be going against the Official Secrets Act and stuff like that. So I went to her apartment. It was quite late at night. She told me all these things in person, and I said, after a while, I said, okay lah, this is a scam lah, right? And I said, it's okay. You relax. Come and stay in my apartment together with me and my wife for tonight, because she actually revealed the address of her place to the scammers, and it was a very elaborate scam lah. So I think the reason that I was able to reach out to her, and the reason why she reached out to me, was because there was a long-standing mentor-mentee relationship that had been established over a long time lah. And in fact, this was when I was doing my PhD at Duke. I had written a lot of articles for Malaysia Kini, and I got to know her remotely when she was an intern for Malaysia Kini, writing some articles and doing some journalism. And my first contact with her was when I told Malaysia Kini, all these articles that I've written, they owe me some payment. I said, okay, why don't you give it to her to buy an air ticket for her to come to the US. That was her first plane ride. So, I think when that kind of relationship was established, or friendship, and later on she was my intern as well, she also gave back by sponsoring one of my internship programs, giving a above market salary to a special internship category, whereby I think she paid 3,000 ringgit for 2 months for an intern, which was relatively high for somebody who hadn't graduated yet. And she made it some sort of an open competition, and she vetted the different entries, and we got somebody in. It was a very good student. He was studying PPE in Oxford actually, and later on, because of value-added networking, he became a special officer to the then Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng through my sort of like recommendation, right? So and again, these are part and parcel of the larger value-added mentoring that I do. I've had over 200 interns in my life as a member of parliament. I don't keep in touch with all of them, but many of them I still keep very close touch with, and still try to give them advice and try to help them out as and when necessary.
For yourself, Kian Ming, who's someone that you consider to be a mentor and somebody that's, has played a huge decision or like influence in your own life?
I think in the political ecosystem, my mentor would be Tony Phua, because he would be the person who brought me into the party, the former member of parliament for Petaling Jaya Utara and then later on Damansara. And also, one of the main protagonists in the 1MDB advocacy. I think many people would, know him for that. And he guided me through a lot of challenging times within the party. And even now, he still gives me value-added advice. I don't take it all of the time, but 95% of the time I would take it. Another person that I look up to, who I wouldn't consider a mentor, but somebody that I respect a lot because of his long tenure in politics, is Tan Sri Lim Kit Siang, who recently celebrated his 83rd birthday. I think he's somebody who's very selfless, somebody who gives a lot of opportunities to younger people to shine, to explore new areas, and to really empower them. And I think these are the kind of qualities of leadership that we do not find enough of in Malaysia. And he obviously had the experience and the qualifications to become even a minister during Mahathir's cabinet, but he chose not to be a minister, not to hold any positions, and continuing to serve the people in his capacity as an MP. I hope that he can enjoy his retirement now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, iconic leaders who have really contributed to the nation. Also, something I'm curious about, I think as mentees, there's a lot to be gained from a mentor-mentee relationship, whether that's professional advice, personal advice. Sometimes in your case, you really helped out on a life situation, right, with the whole crisis that she was going through, the scam. But as a mentor, what have you gained so far from all of your numerous mentor-mentee relationships?
Over 200. That's
Yeah.
a huge number.
So I think probably the main thing would be I get to understand what young people are thinking.
Oh, keep you young.
Keep you on your toes.
As the gap between me and the mentees, the interns and all that grows bigger in terms of age, then their experiences will also be very different. The kind of music that they listen to, the kind of games they play, whether it's on their mobile phones, on their PCs or PlayStation, the kind of activities that they do, So that keeps me young, keeps me connected with the younger generation. And then they will also give me advice in terms of some of the knowledge gaps that I have, whether it's in terms of the latest sort of like vernacular lingo.
Love it.
Or
What did you recently learn?
Uh-oh,
What
you're
did they
gonna-
school you?
Sus. Yeah. So
Sus.
yeah. It's like, oh, okay. Sus meaning suspicious or a bit dodgy. And yeah, they keep coming out with new things that I think my good friends on the Keluar Sekejap podcast also highlight now and then. Yeah. So good urban dictionary references.
Very nice.
Love the Gen Z vibes, keeping you young and on your toes. And as we segue into another topic, Kian Ming, on topic of mental health, right? And so this is something that, you recently shared about on LinkedIn as well. Your personal challenges of during the time when you were in politics, serving the largest parliamentary constituency in Malaysia, and also in the height of a very high-pressured environment with the Sheraton Move, internal party politics, and in addition to all of that, throw in the wonderful COVID-19 into the mix. You had your own experience of dealing with that mental, emotional, physical, spiritual stress even, right? So we would love for you to be able to share how were you coping and what were the ways that you, through that experience, replenish your own energy?
Yeah, I think the period between Sheraton Move where, went to the office as a deputy minister, and then after the announcement, suddenly, you've lost that position. And also the staff that you're working with lost their positions as well. To a situation where you had a lockdown, where, I found myself in opposition again without the resources of government, people needing help, so that was a really stressful time. And, I must admit, probably had a bit of mild depression at that time. I think so did some of my colleagues, because, I had the support of my wife, also a very strong team locally in my constituency. I was able to bounce back relatively quickly and to shift my focus once, things started opening up a bit more, to helping people on the ground, whether it's delivering food to them, later on registering them for the vaccination, and then after that, making sure that the vaccination program was rolled out, effectively in my kawasan, in my area. That was sort of like the way I coped with it. But it's not easy seeing the challenges I saw. When, for example, I delivered some free laptops to some people in my constituency, and some of them were living in nice houses. And I asked him, "Oh, what happened? Oh, my husband is a pilot and he lost his job. So my kids need to study online and I don't have the materials." And I think seeing that I could use my energies to help others rather than to focus too much on myself and my mental challenges. I think that was sort of like a good way to overcome some of those challenges lah. Not easy for everyone, but because I have a good support system, I was able to do it.
One of the things you mentioned is that, you had probably that slight depression. Was it something that you realized on hindsight that, that was something you were going through and even experiencing burnout, right? Was it something that you realized only after having gone through it, overcome it?
Yes, on hindsight. And I think I realized the toll it was taking on me. COVID was in 2020. In 2021, as I, realized and became more self-aware in terms of my own challenges, that was when I decided I didn't want to contest in 2022. Although I only made that announcement public in May of 2022, the first person I told was my wife, obviously. And then the second person was Tony Pua, my mentor. He was hesitant, but I think after a while, he realized that, yes, for my own mental health sake, it would be good for me to take that mental health break from frontline politics in 2022. And I am very glad for it because I found a very good successor who took over my seat in Parliament, Sharizan Johan. And he still has many of my team members working with him. And now I'm able to transition to something, I think, a different phase of my life where I find more time to do meaningful things and still helping out the business community, helping out society, and of course, having more time for myself, my family as well.
That whole season of Sheraton Move, and I think from a Rakyat's perspective, it was also shocking to us, probably much more shocking to you than to us, but in a sense, I think there was a bit of betrayal as well. How did you navigate that feeling? And did you experience that maybe did you feel cynical? Did you feel betrayed? Angry even?
Oh yeah, I definitely was very angry, and the anger that I felt was towards Tun Mahathir, because he resigned as Prime Minister. All of us lost our jobs, and then he was sort of like appointed as caretaker Prime Minister. He didn't lose his job, right? And the way he approached the whole thing, the whole transition process, or the Sheraton Move and the aftermath of it, was very self-centered and selfish. And I think even today we see that reflected in the things that he's saying, whereby he tries to pretend that he is advocating for causes that are helpful to the larger public, but it is all to serve his own political interests. And we saw that in the aftermath of the Sheraton Move. But again, like I said, the anger changed to a more logical way of processing it, to say that it's happened already. Let's see what lessons I can learn from it. Let's see how I can turn that situation into something more proactive. And I think the main lesson that I took from that whole episode was, now that I've been in government before, now that my colleagues have been in government before, now we are back in opposition, we cannot do what we did when we were in opposition without the government experience. Right? So whatever policies that we want to recommend during COVID, it has to be informed by our own government experience. I then had some goodwill with some of the civil servants, including in my own ministry. So even though, the boss is different from another party now, we still could interact with the civil servants, with others in the ecosystem to do valuable things. And of course, during the height of the COVID pandemic, I worked together with Khairi Jamaluddin when he was Health Minister to roll out the Operation Surge Capacity vaccination program in Klang Valley. I was focusing primarily on Selangor. And I think people saw that as a good example of bipartisan cooperation that could bring benefit to the people. May not have been so good on the part of Pakatan Harapan, seeing me working with the so-called enemy, so to speak. But again, I work on principle. I work on benefits in terms of policy execution and design. And I think people could see he was a very effective minister in terms of rolling out the vaccination program.
On the note of KJ, actually, interestingly, that was also a very interesting way where, Kian Ming, yourself, myself, and Janice met over the inaugural Malaysia KL Podfest.
Yes.
Quite fun times then. And it's also, around about couple of months ago when yourself as well as Peter Yong from Mr. Money TV started your own podcast, Are We Okay? Which
Yes.
has now, topped podcast charts all across Malaysia. And for those of you who are unaware, this show, Are We Okay? Is something that Janice and I tune in a lot to, and it really speaks about, policies, governance, economic principles, things that are relatable for the everyday mak chicks and pak chicks and even young people, on the street.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
And it's something that, like I mentioned, Janice and I were huge fans of, and we love that there's also this opportunity to have meaningful discussions. And you and Peter obviously break down the whole conversations in a way that, we understand and we can relate to, which I think is, very, very
Try to be
pertinent.
accessible, but I was asking some of the staff at Mr. Money TV, the younger ones, the millennials and the Gen Zs, hey, these things that we're talking about, do you understand? They said politics part a bit difficult to understand, but again, I try to relate it to public policy in ways that will impact them, and probably this is one way where one area where I think at the end of the day I have to acknowledge the age gap and maybe get some of the younger people to host some of the shows, get them in as a co-host temporarily, and then get younger people to come and contribute to that conversation in ways that can relate to the younger generation.
It sounds like a very fun and exciting angle, getting some of the Gen Z
Get their take, right?
yeah.
Of like what's happening and how it, I think more importantly, how does it impact their day-to-day life?
Correct, and
Need
also
that
the
connection.
communications, and also the
Yeah.
communication of those things,
Yeah.
those policies.
So we're curious to know, what are some of your personal aspirations with regards to this new podcast venture?
We obviously want to grow the audience. Subscribers now, I think about 14,500. If let's say we can reach 100,000 by the end of the year, that would be a good milestone. And not just reaching that milestone just for the sake of reaching it, but also wanting to make public policy discussions more accessible to the man on the street in Malaysia and even beyond. That's one aspiration. Second would be we want to get more people, guests, maybe including yourselves as well, people in the business community, people in the public service in different areas, to come and have longer conversations so that we can see what kind of value-added ideas we can generate from those conversations. That would be a second part. And then the third part would be the commercial part. I'm very open about this as well, very transparent. We want to, get more sponsors to work with us, to partner with us so that we can showcase their products. And not just showcase for the sake of showcasing, but to try to explain and even show and explain our experiences and interactions with the different products, whether it's services, whether it's consumables and others that we want to bring into the ecosystem.
What's something that has surprised you about podcasting?
What has surprised me is the fact that I am looking forward to recording and getting the podcast out there. Because one of the reasons why I was a bit hesitant to start my own podcast was that I thought it would take a lot of work. I thought it would be a burden. But working with Peter and his team, his young team, it's been a pleasure. It's been great interacting with Peter, and we have a pretty good dynamic that we want to build upon. I'm also looking forward to growing with the team and also growing the team so that we can bring in more value-added conversations and even increase the number of podcasts within the Mr. Money TV ecosystem. So yeah, that would be something that I'm looking forward to this year and beyond.
And on the topic of, looking at what's in the horizon, just wanted to reference a LinkedIn post that you posted a year ago that you mentioned that you were not retiring from politics, just taking a break to regroup, to recharge. So we want to hear from you, and you alluded to that a little bit earlier. What is something that you would do differently if and when the political door would open up again for you in the near future?
I think the political door is still open in the sense that I'm still contributing to my party. I do fundraising for them. I speak to the young people who are thinking about joining the party. I try to do value-added networking between different stakeholder groups and leaders of mine who are in government right now. I think what I would want to do differently would be if I were to rejoin frontline politics. I would want to make it clear to my colleagues the value proposition that I want to bring to the table, not just for myself, but for the party. And to really dispel the idea that, politics needs to be a dog-eat-dogs game, but rather it can be a much more sort of like collaborative effort where we all can gain together. And if let's say they can buy into that kind of value proposition, I think I would be much more keener to rejoin frontline politics. But if let's say that's a value proposition that maybe my colleagues don't quite understand or don't really want to embrace, then I'm fine not going back into frontline politics and continuing to serve the people through other means. And I think I've seen already, and I'm sure you guys have seen in your own lives as well, as you close one door on one particular aspect of your career, other doors will open, and the person upstairs would know how to do what's best for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, you sit on multiple boards now. We know that, besides tailors, you're also involved as independent advisor.
Yeah, I'm a board member of MIDA, the Malaysian Investment Development Authority. I'm also, on a pro bono basis, advisor to a number of associations in Malaysia. So those are roles that I think will continue, and I'm always looking for other value-added roles to play within the larger ecosystem.
Well, Kian Ming, on that note, before we wrap up, we've got a couple of audience-submitted questions that are especially, questions that our audience has specially requested. They'll love to hear your response to. So yeah, Janice, why don't you go ahead and play the audio note that we have. First one on a question by our listener, Aaron Lim.
So I'll play it for you.
Hey, Kian Ming. This is Aaron. I think I speak on behalf of a lot of urban Malaysians in saying that we miss your voice in actual policy making in parliament and government. But nevertheless, I wish you all the best in whatever that you're doing now. I have a question regarding how do we think about our careers? I suppose after one has been in a role for a relatively long time, if you're a reasonably ambitious person, you want to move on to the next role to continue developing. So my question to you is, what factors do you consider when evaluating a new opportunity, whatever that may be? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron, for that question. I would answer it in this way. I think in the past, older generations, you sort of like work in one job or maybe two at most in your entire life. And that was sort of like your approach to career. You move up within the ranks of one organization, at most two. But now I think for younger people, I would recommend that they see their career as a process of collecting and amplifying a number of skill sets. So your career path should not be seen as by company, but the kind of skill ladder that you want to undertake. So, you could stay in one company for your whole life, and you could have a multitude of skills that you develop in that particular company. Or you could move from different companies and even different industries to build up that skill set. So that's one. The second one would be building up a series of experiences. What are the experiences that you want to look for in ways that would contribute or add value to your own life and the kind of larger ecosystem that you occupy? So again, this could be in one company. Experiences could mean you get posted to another country, another part of the company, in terms of jurisdiction and responsibility. Or it could be in different companies, even different sectors. And then the third part would be, I think, more personal priorities. What are the priorities that you want to achieve in terms of the kind of values you want to pursue, the kind of impact you want to have on your company, on society? And again, that may be in the context of one company that fits your values. It may be that, you want to move from one company to another when, let's say, a change of leadership in one company leads to a transition or a shift in values that you may not align 100% to. Then you move on to the next company or ecosystem where you feel it's closer, more aligned to your own priorities. So I think those three areas, skills, experiences, and then also priorities.
Very comprehensive, and personal priorities balanced with equipping your career toolkit, so to speak.
Correct.
All right, and we have the second question from Su Yin Ong.
What led you to take an interest in leadership as a politician? And what would you advise young people who may be interested to join the political foray as a career or as a calling? Thank you.
So by default, when you become an elected representative, you are immediately put in the ranks of leadership, right? You are leading your constituency team. You are a leader in your own community, trying to give direction to different, areas of development, different policy areas. And of course, the higher up you go, the more responsibilities and leadership roles you have, especially if, let's say, you have to juggle your political leadership responsibilities with your own ministry responsibilities if you are a minister or deputy minister. For young people who want to expose themselves to this ecosystem, I would say the following. Firstly, there are different ways in which you can contribute to the public policy and sort of like a public impact ecosystem. And politics is just one part, right? You can work for a think tank that advocates for policies. You can work for the government, ministries that also has an impact in terms of the lives of the people that they touch. You can work for a government agency. If let's say you don't want to go through the normal PTD route, meaning government agency where you're on contract, probably get paid a little bit higher when you're one of these government agencies. You can also work in the academic field and then do research on public policies that can contribute to the policy conversation. You can work for a consulting company and do work for government projects. Of course, you get paid a lot more for that, but the stress levels are also higher. Right? So I would say that there are different entry points. In the specific area of politics, you can work for to be a special officer or an assistant to a member of parliament or a state elected rep. This can be at the parliamentary level in terms of policies, in terms of policy research and things of that nature. You can join a party and just volunteer for different activities. You can get appointed as a local councillor in some of the states. And I would say that, best way for young people, especially those who are still studying, would be to intern for a politician to find out what the political landscape is like. Of course, you should try to do your homework so that you intern for a politician that you respect and can add value to your own life experiences.
And that whose values hopefully aligns with yours
Hopefully,
as well, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
All right. And the third and final question we have is from Samuel Wong.
Hi, Kian Ming. This is Sam, and I'm working in the government sector. I think it's been a while that Malaysians have felt proud about our country. My question is there a need to have a patriotic spirit, especially for the younger generation? And if we should, how should we go about it other than the bare minimum of paying taxes and going to vote? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. First of all, if you're working, you should pay taxes. And if you're, 18 and above, you should go and vote as and when the elections come. I think in the area of patriotism, the way that government thinks about it, including the Malaysian government, is a lot of sort of like chest thumping and flag waving in ways that may not necessarily motivate or connect with the younger generation. I think for the younger generation, they are looking for authenticity. And this authenticity can be found in politicians. Not easy. Not that many out there are truly authentic. But they can also be found in other people who are part of the sort of like a public landscape. These could be, social media influencers. These could be people in the sporting arena. This could be entertainers. This could be people who are working for NGOs. So you can find people who are contributing to the ecosystem in different areas of life, including in public life in different sectors. And you can draw inspiration from them. You can maybe even, work in causes that are linked to these people in ways that resonate with you. And if let's say you feel you have the capability, you have the passion for it, you yourself can venture into these kinds of activities, like you guys starting a podcast, people starting social enterprises, wanting to help the marginalized among our midst, starting an association, starting an NGO, starting, even like a football club or a basketball club so that you can get more kids involved in different healthy activities. That's part and parcel of how I think we can demonstrate our own love for our country and our fellow Malaysians as well as others around us who are not citizens. Yeah, so don't just look to politicians. There are many other people out there that I think you can draw inspiration from and work with. And this would include institutions and associations as well as people.
I think a really good reminder that, there is beauty to be found even in the midst of chaos and in the darkest places. So thank you so much,
thanks.
Dr. Ong Kian Ming. We really appreciate your time here today, and we really hope that this conversation adds value. You've shared so many of your stories on the different life lessons that you have learned the hard way, and we really appreciate your time.
And I hope we have more opportunities, for value-added networking, value-added transparent interactions and engagements, and then finally, value-added mentoring opportunities.
Wonderful way to cap this conversation off. Thanks once again, Kian Ming.
Thank you.
If you stuck around to the end of this episode, we want to say thank you for exploring with us. And if you don't already, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review, and most importantly, share this episode with your friends.
We'd love to hear from you, so you can also connect with us on Instagram using the Instagram handle Explore This Podcast. ACTSPLORE This Podcast. New episodes for Explore This drops every alternate Mondays at 8 p.m. See you then!